Few American lives trace a path as improbable or as influential as that of Dwight D. Eisenhower. Born into modest circumstances and raised far from the corridors of power, Eisenhower would go on to command the largest military alliance in history, defeat Nazi Germany in Western Europe, and then lead the United States through a tense, transformative decade as its 34th president. His story is not one of dramatic speeches or ideological crusades, but of steady leadership, coalition building, and a calm belief that patience and preparation often win the longest battles. Humble beginnings and formative years. Dwight David Eisenhower was born on October 14, 1890, in Denison, Texas, the third of 7 sons in a family that knew financial struggle well. When he was still a baby, the Eisenhowers moved to Abilene, Kansas, a small Midwestern town shaped by hard work, religious discipline, and close community ties. His father worked in a creamery, and money was always tight. These early years left a lasting imprint. Eisenhower developed a deep respect for effort, teamwork, and self-restraint. Known to friends as Ike, he was sociable and athletic rather than academic. He loved sports, especially football. And while he took school seriously enough, he was never drawn to scholarly life. After graduating from high school in 1909, Eisenhower delayed his own education to work and helped support a brother through college, a responsibility that reflected both family loyalty and maturity beyond his years. West Point and the making of an officer. Eisenhower entered the U.S. Military Academy at West Point in 1911, a decision that deeply troubled his pacifist mother. At the academy, he excelled on the football field until a serious knee injury ended his athletic ambitions. Academically, he was solid but not exceptional, graduating in 1915 in a class that would later become famous for producing an extraordinary number of generals. This period shaped Eisenhower's leadership style. He was not the top student or the most disciplined cadet, but he learned how institutions work, how hierarchies function, and, most importantly, how to manage people. These skills would later define his greatest successes: marriage, loss, and early military career. In 1916, Eisenhower married Mamie Geneva Dowd, whose warmth and steadiness became a lifelong anchor. Their marriage endured long separations, public scrutiny, and personal tragedy. The couple had 2 sons. Their first child died young from scarlet fever, a loss that deeply affected Eisenhower and reinforced his emotional reserve. During World War I, Eisenhower never saw combat overseas. Instead, he commanded a tank training center in the United States, earning praise for his organizational skill and discipline. Though disappointed to miss battlefield service, he gained invaluable experience managing large operations, experience that would prove decisive decades later. Mentorship and professional growth. The years between the world wars were crucial. Eisenhower served in the Panama Canal Zone, where he came under the influence of General Fox Connor, a mentor who taught him strategic thinking, coalition warfare, and the political dimensions of military command. Under Connor's guidance, Eisenhower attended elite military schools, graduating first in his class at the Command and General Staff School and later from the Army War College. Assignments in France, Washington, and the Philippines followed, including a demanding stint as aide to General Douglas MacArthur. While the relationship was often tense, it exposed Eisenhower to high-level command and the complexities of civil-military relations. By the eve of World War II, Eisenhower was still relatively unknown, but exceptionally well prepared. World War II and the burden of command. The outbreak of World War II transformed Eisenhower's life almost overnight. Rapid promotions followed as his planning ability caught the attention of Army Chief of Staff George C. Marshall. In 1942, Eisenhower was chosen to command U.S. forces in Europe, leapfrogging hundreds of more senior officers. His defining role came as Supreme Commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force. Eisenhower was not a battlefield tactician in the traditional sense. His genius lay in coordination. He balanced competing national interests, managed strong-willed generals, and kept a vast coalition focused on a single objective: the Allied invasion of North Africa, the campaign in Italy, and finally, the Normandy landings in June 1944 placed enormous responsibility on his shoulders. The decision to launch D-Day hinged on uncertain weather and imperfect intelligence. Eisenhower accepted full responsibility, even drafting a statement taking blame in case of failure. The invasion succeeded, and within a year, Nazi Germany surrendered. From war hero to national figure. At war's end, Eisenhower was one of the most admired figures in the world. He returned home to public adoration, served briefly as Army Chief of Staff, and later became president of Columbia University. Though academia was not his natural environment, his visibility only increased. His best-selling memoir, crusade in Europe made him financially secure and further cemented his public image. In the early 1950s, as Cold War tensions intensified, Eisenhower was appointed Supreme Commander of NATO, tasked with building a unified Western defense. The role reinforced his belief in alliances and collective security, principles that would define his presidency. The road to the White House. Both major political parties courted Eisenhower, but in 1952, he aligned with the Republicans. Running alongside Richard Nixon, he campaigned as a reassuring figure, a war hero promising honesty, balance, and peace. His slogan, "I like Ike," captured the public mood perfectly. Eisenhower won decisively, taking office at a moment when Americans were weary of war and anxious about communism. His presidency would be shaped by the challenge of maintaining security without sacrificing stability, governing with restraint at home. Domestically, Eisenhower practiced what he called modern republicanism. He believed in fiscal responsibility, limited government expansion, and continuity rather than upheaval. While he reduced certain controls and emphasized balanced budgets, he did not dismantle New Deal programs. Instead, he expanded Social Security, raised the minimum wage, and created the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. This cautious approach frustrated ideological purists on both sides, but appealed to a broad middle ground. Eisenhower governed less through public confrontation and more through quiet negotiation, believing that stability itself was a form of progress. Cold War strategy and global tensions. Foreign policy dominated Eisenhower's presidency. Alongside Secretary of State John Foster Dulles, he pursued containment of communism through alliances, deterrence, and strategic restraint. NATO was strengthened, new defense pacts were formed in Asia, and the administration relied heavily on nuclear deterrence to avoid direct large-scale wars. Eisenhower ended active U.S. involvement in the Korean War and sought to avoid another ground conflict in Asia, even as tensions simmered in Vietnam. He also approved covert intelligence operations abroad, decisions that achieved short-term objectives but later drew sharp criticism. One of his most visionary moments came with the Atoms for Peace initiative, which promoted the peaceful use of nuclear energy and led to the creation of international frameworks for atomic cooperation. Leadership style and lasting legacy. Eisenhower's leadership was often underestimated because it lacked drama, yet his calm demeanor masked a shrewd political mind. He understood power, personalities, and timing. He preferred consensus over confrontation and believed that the true measure of leadership was what did not happen. Wars avoided, crises contained, institutions preserved. By the time he left office in 1961, the United States was economically strong, militarily secure, and relatively stable in an unstable world. Eisenhower spent his final years reflecting on the dangers of unchecked power, famously warning against the military-industrial complex. The quiet strength of Dwight D. Eisenhower. Dwight D. Eisenhower's life challenges the idea that greatness requires flamboyance or constant visibility. From a small Kansas town to the center of global power, he rose not through ambition alone, but through preparation, patience, and trust in collective effort. His legacy endures not just in victories won, but in disasters avoided, and in a model of leadership that values steadiness over spectacle. If this story changed how you see leadership and power, that's the real takeaway. History is shaped more by quiet decisions than loud moments. For more deep, timeless videos like this, like and subscribe.